Hurricane Michael makes landfall. One of the strongest storms to reach the U.S. in decades is hitting the southeast. We're tracking the damage and the forecast. Plus, a new public health partnership. The city and county of San Diego are getting help for the upcoming flu season.
A gun show without guns and ammo? No. We're looking at other venues. We're not going away.
The president of the Crossroads of the West gun show feels the event has been unfairly portrayed. She talks with KPBS about the gun show's uncertain future in Del Mar.
We've worked incredibly hard to deliver those results to our residents. And now we're asking for another 4 years to make sure that we can take those results even farther.
So as a council member, I would be pushing for greater amounts of funding and budgeting for rebuilding roads.
And tonight in the race for City Council, we focus on District 6. Hear from the candidates hoping to represent communities like Kearny Mesa, Mira Mesa, and Claremont. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Murphy. A major natural disaster is unfolding tonight along the Gulf Coast. Hurricane Michael made landfall this morning as a large Category 4 storm. This video is from Panama City, Florida. Hurricane Michael's sustained winds were 155 miles per hour at landfall. That's just 2 miles per hour shy of a Category 5 status. Coastal towns are facing life-threatening conditions due to fallen trees and flying debris. Flash flooding and storm surge will also be a threat in the hours ahead. Regina Miller is tracking the storm and shows us where it's headed next.
Well, Hurricane Michael came on shore as a powerful Category 4 hurricane, and as it moved across the western panhandle of Florida, it stayed as a Category 4, but has downgraded to a Category 3. It is going to be working its way northeastward, expected to diminish across parts of central Georgia to a tropical storm before making its way on into parts of the Carolinas as we go Thursday on into Friday. Some of the top wind gusts reported with this around Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida, a 129-mile-per-hour wind gust reported there. Panama City, Florida, 116-mile-per-hour gust reported as the storm came on shore. Projected power outages extend across Georgia into the Carolinas and even the possibility in southern parts of Virginia. And taking a look at your storm surge flooding, this is the major problem across parts of the panhandle of Florida with 10 to 15-foot storm surge a possibility.
PBS NewsHour will have extensive coverage of Hurricane Michael that airs tonight at 7 on KPBS. You can also find updates on the storm at kpbs.org. Another major story emerged on Wall Street this afternoon where stocks suffered their worst day in almost a year. The Dow fell 831 points, which is more than 3%. The Nasdaq fell 4%. Technology stocks took some of the worst losses. That includes San Diego-based Qualcomm, down nearly 5%. Another local company, Illumina, was down nearly 6%. Analysts say concerns over rising interest rates are part of the reason for the sell-off. This is the fifth straight day of losses. This week, KPBS is focusing on the race for San Diego City Council. District 6 includes Claremont Mesa, Kearny Mesa, Mira Mesa, and Sereno Valley. And as Claire Trageser reports, it's where a former radio host is trying to unseat Councilman Chris Cate.
Campaign called you yesterday, and you were kind enough to give me a call back.
Democrat Tommy Howe has a tough hill to climb before the November election. In June's primary race, he earned 17% of the vote against Chris Cate, the Republican incumbent councilman. Howe is also far behind Cate in fundraising. He had a little over $4,800 in the bank as of September 22nd, while Cate had about $151,000. But Howe is not dissuaded and hopes to ride the predicted blue wave of support for Democratic candidates that is predicted for this November election. He points out that there are about 6,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans in the district. Howe is a former radio host for 91X, KPRI, and FM 94.9. If elected, he says he'd focus on tackling the biggest issue in the district, roads. He says if he's elected and the Democrats on the city council have a veto-proof 6-3 majority, they can allocate more funding to help their districts.
A lot of the council members should be able to go and get funding first instead of the mayor picking his favorites.
Incumbent Chris Kate has a new demanding constituent whose needs he's working to meet. He and his wife Maria welcomed their first baby, a girl, in July. Kate says while he's been in office, his biggest accomplishments have been increases to library hours, repaving 190 miles of streets, and saving 2 senior centers in Claremont and Mira Mesa that were on the brink of shutting down. If reelected, he says he'd continue to work on road and sidewalk repairs.
There are a number of folks who haven't gotten their streets repaved yet or their sidewalk replaced, and we want to make sure we get to those and get them done. With 3,000 miles of streets in the city, it takes time, but we should be doing a better job of providing street repairs for residents.
Both Kate and Howe stress their commitment to improving District 6 and will continue to make their cases to voters before the November 6th election. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
You can now prepare for the election with the KPBS Voter Guide. We have a link right on our homepage. It's a partnership with Voters Edge California. You'll find information on all the races and candidates right now at kpbs.org. KPBS News partner iNewsSource is following the money during this election season. Jill Castellano and Brad Racino take a look at the ballot measure that could drastically change county elections.
You're here to fill us in on Proposition D, which would move all races for county offices to November.
Yeah, the way it stands right now, if someone's running for county office and they get more than 50% of the vote in the June primary election, they win. It's over.
Dunskies.
Proposition D would force all of those races to go to a runoff in the November general election, no matter what.
When you say county office, you mean the County Board of Supervisors?
Yes, but there are other races too, like sheriff, district attorney, and assessor. Those 3 races were all decided in June this year. Side note, the city of San Diego passed a very similar measure back in 2016, but that's only for city races.
Okay, so why do people want to move county elections to November?
We talked to Kira Green from the liberal-leaning Center for Policy Initiatives about that. She's supporting Measure D.
Primaries are times where we have an underrepresentation of young people, people of color, and low-income folks. So it's not as a representative time as the November elections.
So it's good for Democrats, right? A bigger share of Democrats vote in the general election.
Right. It's why some Republicans say this is just an attempt to get more Democrats in office. But at the same time, there are Democrats who say people who are opposing this are just trying to keep Republicans in office.
So who are these opponents?
Well, there's no official opposition campaign, but there were a couple attempts to keep Prop D off the ballot. The county tried to push the measure to the 2020 ballot with the help of the all-Republican Board of Supervisors, and Tony Kravarik, chairman of the county Republican Party, filed a lawsuit. Both attempts failed, but here's Kravarik.
What Measure D does, it increases the cost of running campaigns and makes it even less accessible for the average person to run for office.
His point is that candidates need to raise more money if they're running in both the primary and the general elections, which is hard if you don't have a lot of big, wealthy donors to back you.
Okay, so let's shift and talk about the money. Tell us about the political committee that's supporting Measure D.
That campaign has raised about $720,000. Some of the donors are Democratic politicians, including Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher and Councilwoman Barbara Bree. But the biggest donor is the local chapter of the Service Employees International Union, or SEIU. They've donated about 40% of all the money the campaign has, about $266,000.
SEIU is the largest union for county government workers.
And the other big donors are also unions. United Domestic Workers and the San Diego Building and Trades Council each donated $50,000.
Wait a second here. If this ballot measure passes, more Democrats could be voting in our county elections.
Yeah.
And aren't Democrats big supporters of labor?
They are. The labor unions are giving a lot of money to Democrats in San Diego. SEIU has given almost $50,000 to the Democratic Party of San Diego this year, and they haven't given any money to the Republican Party.
Speaking of the Republican Party, what does Kravarik have to say about all this?
He says labor unions are funding this campaign to get more Democrats in office because Democrats will support policies that benefit labor unions. So he says it's out of their self-interest.
And I'm guessing the supporters of Proposition D aren't buying this.
Not at all. They say we should have as many people voting in our county elections as possible, and if that means that there are more Democrats in office, that's because more people want more Democrats in office.
And how can people learn more about who's funding this ballot measure?
We built a new tool at data.inewssource.org, which you can use to search through more than $100 million in political campaign fundraising and spending. We have one for the city of San Diego, and we have another for San Diego County, which is especially cool because nobody's ever done this before for San Diego County. It's really easy to search by campaign, donor name, their employer, their occupation. You can find Measure D there, along with candidates running for the County Board of Supervisors, Sheriff, District Attorney, and more.
Tomorrow's iNewsSource segment will cover the bond proposal for San Diego Unified Schools. iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. California's Secretary of State says it might be time to put a pause on the DMV's voter registration program. Capital Public Radio's Nadine Sabai has details on new problems that have come to light.
Motor Voter was launched in the spring, and it automatically registers people to vote when they obtain or renew their driver's license. At a press conference, Secretary Padilla blamed the DMV for undermining the public's confidence in the electoral process.
The legislation calling for California Motor Voter was passed and signed into law years ago. The technology was years in the making. And for the DMV to still be suffering from these types of mistakes is absolutely unacceptable.
The secretary is running for re-election this year, and his opponent, election law attorney Mark Moiser, says these mistakes are happening because Padilla rushed the program into existence.
They did not make sure that the databases were properly talking with each other. They didn't make sure that the employees were properly trained. They did not make sure that safeguards were in place. It's been an absolute disaster.
Padilla has called for the DMV to conduct an independent audit of the department's technology and infrastructure processes. In Sacramento, I'm Nadine Sabai.
Campaign managers and pollsters are evaluating any impact on these midterm contests. Tonight, I checked in with PBS NewsHour correspondent Yamiche Alcindor about whether the November election will be a referendum on President Trump and the newest Supreme Court Justice, Brett Kavanaugh. Yamiche Alcindor, thanks so much for joining us. So what are the benefits and risks for any candidate with a Trump endorsement, but especially for someone like California gubernatorial candidate John Cox?
Well, what you see are that candidates are looking at Donald Trump and saying, yes, he's still someone who's popular among his base, but they really have a lot of risks that they have to take, especially in a place like California, where people, even if they're Republican, aren't maybe as staunchly Republican as the people maybe in Kentucky or in other parts of the Midwest. So what you have is really a risk for candidates who say, I am all about Trump. I want to talk about Trump all the time. One thing that's really important to note is that it was something like 47 minutes into their debate before John Cox uttered the name Donald Trump, and there's an idea there that they don't want to talk about Donald Trump, and that's what a lot of Republican candidates are like, unfortunately, at least for the president.
And we've seen the president's campaign rallies in other states like Kansas, and since California also has several congressional contests, what are the chances of Trump holding a campaign rally here in the Golden State?
Well, I'll tell you that President Trump and the people who plan his schedule think very deeply about where to spend his time. So if they find that there's an area in California where they think that the polling shows that President Trump can come in and actually help a candidate, they will do that. So it really depends. I remember the last week of the 2016 campaign, Donald Trump went into North Carolina, and he went to this place that was maybe an hour and a half from an airport. And there were people who said, why is he spending all his time in North Carolina? This is a stupid move. I can tell you when we got to that field, there were thousands of people waiting for Donald Trump. So he knows what areas to go to, and he understands kind of what his appeal is to local people.
Okay. Senator Mitch McConnell predicted a Republican voter surge heading into the midterm elections following Kavanaugh's confirmation. What's the reality?
Well, the reality is that a recent poll by PBS NewsHour, NPR, and Marist shows that there was an enthusiasm gap between Democrats and Republicans over the summer that has all but evaporated. More than 80% of Democrats and more than 80% of Republicans now view the midterm elections as very important. So, and that's after Brett Kavanaugh's nomination and all of the things that went into that. This is true that Mitch McConnell is right in that Republican voters are now motivated because of Brett Kavanaugh to go to the polls. Whether Whether or not that will hold up in 30 days when people actually go to the polls is a whole other story. But Mitch McConnell is excited about those numbers, and Democrats should be worried looking at those numbers.
And finally, what part will churches play in the midterm elections? Like, how much of an effect will they have on voters?
Well, typically, the churches, especially evangelical voters, are very, very much thinking about the Supreme Court and their vote. Because of Brett Kavanaugh and all that went into his nomination and his confirmation, you have a lot of evangelical voters now pointing at Donald Trump and saying, look, he gave us 2 Supreme Court justices. He's also filled many, many judicial appointments with conservatives. So you have a lot of evangelical voters who are looking at President Trump and saying he is delivering on the things that we asked him to deliver on. And that's all, of course, while evangelical voters still have issues with maybe the way that President Trump tweets or his extramarital affairs, alleged extramarital affairs, I should say. But there's this idea that evangelicals are still fired up for President Trump, so that could also be a problem for Democrats.
Yamiche Alcindor with PBS NewsHour. Thank you.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, a monstrous storm makes landfall, the latest on Hurricane Michael lashing the Gulf Coast. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
The shark that attacked a teenage boy off Encinitas last month was a great white. Long Beach State University's Shark Lab says DNA evidence from the shark was recovered from the boy's wetsuit. He was attacked while lobster diving on the morning of September 29th. The shark was not found. The boy is now at home and recovering from his injuries. It's almost flu season, and as KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar tells us, San Diego City and county officials are announcing a new partnership to help people get prepared.
The reality of how severe and dangerous the flu is was a wake-up call for my family and me.
Fighting the flu is personal for District 5 Councilman Mark Kersey. 4 years ago, his brother died from the flu.
It was a particularly bad year. It was the H1N1 strain, and he was 38, father of 4, husband, brother, son, and had no underlying health issues.
Today, Kersey announced a partnership with Waxy Sanitary Supply and Gojo, the makers of Purell, that will equip all 57 recreation centers and 36 public libraries in the city with hand sanitizing stations.
We're going to roll our hands, get the backside of our hands while we're interlacing our fingers as well. And before we finish, we want to make sure we get each thumb. And that should take about 15 seconds. And voila. We've just sanitized our hands.
Clean, germ-free hands are important to avoid getting sick.
Washing your hands thoroughly and often, and if water and soap are not available, then using a hand sanitizer is the next best thing.
Getting vaccinated, county health officials say, should always be the first line of prevention. Last year, 342 people in San Diego died from complications from the flu, the most since the county started tracking flu deaths almost 20 years ago.
When you look at it, we had a lot more people die of the flu than Hep A, and the flu just doesn't get that level of attention because everybody's had the flu, right? And so there's a tendency to just not take it all that seriously.
They hope clean hands and being proactive will keep San Diego safe this flu season. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
Rough surf is expected in the days ahead. This is video from this morning where surfers were enjoying the waves in Oceanside. Regina Miller has details on the changing conditions in tonight's forecast.
Well, taking a look here across the area, you can see how things are pretty dry all across central down to Southern California, Arizona. Not really much to see here, folks, with our satellite and radar. Now, as we go into tonight, we will have some increasing clouds once again along the coast. Chula Vista is at 60 degrees overnight. Into San Diego, 64. Oceanside, 55 degrees, 59 in Borrego Springs. So in the metro area, 64 degrees with those increasing clouds. And as we look ahead to your Thursday, still looking pleasant here. We'll start out the morning with some low clouds giving way to some sunshine into Oceanside, also down to Chula Vista. San Diego, you've got some sunshine for the afternoon at 71 degrees. Ramona's at 72 degrees for your daytime high. As we go Thursday night through Friday, we are going to be dealing right along the coastline with some very rough, large swells and rough surf as well as rip currents. Now, a Tropical downpours are going to be well to our south into Mexico as Tropical Storm Sergio weakens, but it will bring some rain. We are going to be looking at the chance for some showers around as we go into the weekend. So in the coast areas, low clouds breaking on Friday at 75 degrees, but we've got some showers in the forecast and clouds, 70 degrees on Saturday. Sunday still could have a shower possible at 70 degrees, sunny and nice then for Monday. Inland areas, we're going to have our temperatures getting into the 80s on Friday, partly sunny. As we go into Saturday, cooler, 70 degrees for your daytime high. So that's a significant drop off with some showers, clouds and sun as we head into Sunday. In the mountain areas, we'll have a temperature of 60 degrees for Friday with a mostly sunny sky, cool, and then some showers, and only in the 50s here on Saturday. Could be a thunderstorm on Sunday. In the desert locations, we have a few showers coming in here as well on Saturday with a cooler day with a high of 78 degrees. On Sunday, there could be a thunderstorm in the area and then plenty of sunshine for Monday. I'm Regina Miller, KPBS News.
A big decision was made today that will change how the McClellan-Palomar Airport in Carlsbad operates. The County Board of Supervisors voted to approve a 20-year master plan for the airport. Part of the update includes extending the existing runway up to 800 feet. The county says this would allow airplanes to reach the East Coast, Europe, and parts of China without having to refuel. Gun shows are a staple at the Del Mar Fairgrounds, but now the Fairgrounds Board is looking into hosting the events without firearms. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman went to a gun show and spoke with the operator about the board's decision.
Crossroads of the West gun shows have been coming to Del Mar for over 30 years.
These are cool.
Crossroads President Tracy Alcott manages the shows at the fairgrounds.
It's a family-owned business, and we've been coming here. I came here as a teenager, and now here we are with my teenagers are here helping me work.
Having never been to a gun show myself, I didn't know what to expect. But once inside, I found it sort of like a Comic-Con for gun enthusiasts.
I think these people who are speaking against firearms don't understand that we are sporting people.
Of course, people are here buying guns. There's handguns and rifles, but there are also other items too, namely gun accessories like magazines, ammunition, targets, and lots of individual parts. Every year there are 5 gun shows at the fairgrounds, but no shows are planned after this December.
Thank you. Motion carries 8-1.
The Fairgrounds Board voted to postpone the shows for up to a year while it looks at hosting shows without guns or ammunition.
A gun show without guns and ammo? No. We're looking at other venues. We're not going away. They can put a moratorium on us a year while they do their safety study. Without any input from us.
Fairgrounds Board President Stephen Shoemaker supported holding off on scheduling gun shows. He said the gun shows weren't safe, pointing out incidents reported by the Sheriff's Department over the last few years that include petty theft, battery, and possession of a controlled substance. Shoemaker also says he spoke with the California Department of Justice about the gun shows.
We've had actually 2 meetings with DOJ, and there have been a number of arrests, felons in the possession here on the fairgrounds, sending their wives and their girlfriends in to buy ammunition and guns here at the fairgrounds. A number of arrests. In fact, I think he said one particular Saturday a year or 2 ago, there was 4 such arrests in the parking lot. Is that safe? I don't think so.
The gun show doesn't deny there have been arrests at its shows.
That's why we have law enforcement here. We pay for law enforcement to be here at the front door. We know DOJ's here. We send them a list every week before the show of who we know that's going to be here selling firearms, and they inspect that list and let me know who's approved and who is not. And then we know they're here in their undercover and in uniform capacity, and we're glad for that.
Crossroads of the West feels its show's safety is being unfairly portrayed.
Has the fair had arrests? Mm-hmm. Did you have arrests at a concert a couple weeks ago? Mm-hmm. Do concerts have arrests? Yeah, they do. So every event here, not just the gun show, have people here who break the law. They get arrested.
KPBS did a comparison of arrests at fairgrounds events this year. According to the Sheriff's Department, the San Diego County Fair had 13 arrests, ranging from drunken public to spousal battery and DUI. Kaboo's 2018 Music Festival had 16 arrests, minors with alcohol, battery, and possession of narcotics among them. And through 4 gun shows this year, there has been 1 arrest by DOJ for a felon in possession of ammunition. Before deciding to put the gun shows on hold, the Fairgrounds Board listened to hours of public comment. It also received letters of support and opposition from elected officials. But the gun show says while Fairgrounds staff talked with them, the actual board left them in the dark.
There was no question in my mind that before the meeting was started, they had made their mind up. They had to show that they were maybe going through the process, but they didn't. They had made their minds up and they made their decision, and anything we could say wouldn't have swayed them any other way.
Patrick Kearns, the fairground's public safety director, says he attends the gun shows on a regular basis. It's his job to create a safety and security plan for the shows.
To buy a gun at the gun show, it's the same as buying a gun at any gun store. You got to comply with all the laws.
In a letter to the board, he says the gun shows are in compliance with all local, state, and federal laws and have not had any violations. Part of the board's action, fairground staff have until December of 2019 to return with the proposals for gun shows that promote safety and educational purposes.
So far, they haven't contacted us to try and get our input or see what we can do to work with them. I think they made the decision and they're not really wanting to discuss it.
Crossroads of the West says it does not want to leave Del Mar, but will keep having gun shows in San Diego.
And we're getting emails from people who attend the shows saying, what about this venue? What about this venue? So we've got people who are looking out for us and who want the gun shows to continue in their community. So we'll honor that and provide a gun show for them.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.